The air was heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Michael stood at a desolate crossroads, the faint glow of a distant street lamp his only companion. His grip on the phone tightened as the voice on the other end spoke words that would haunt him forever. "If you don't choose, your child dies." Every syllable seemed to strike his chest like a physical blow, and for a brief moment, the world around him faded. He had always believed in justice, in making the right choice, no matter the cost. But now, with the decision at hand, he realized there was no such thing as a perfect choice. His mind raced as the silence on the other end grew heavier, a reminder of the finality of the decision. He could feel the weight of his past failures crushing down on him, knowing that any decision now could push him into irreversible regret. His breath came in short gasps as he tried to gather his thoughts, but the truth was clear. There was no escape from the consequences of this moment. The seconds felt like hours. Michael's mind raced as he stepped away from the crossroads, leaving the phone call behind. His legs felt heavy, as though the weight of the decision had taken root in his body. Every step forward felt like a step deeper into darkness. He had always believed that in moments of crisis, the right path would reveal itself. But now, nothing seemed clear. The voice had left him no room for doubt, no room for mercy. His heart beat faster as he remembered the tone of the voice on the other end of the line. Cold, calculated, unwavering. He had been forced into this corner, and now, there was no turning back. His eyes scanned the empty street, desperate for some sign that he wasn't alone in his struggle. But all he saw was the harsh glow of the street lamp, stretching its light in vain, trying to break through the suffocating darkness around him. In that moment, Michael realized that regret wasn't a luxury, it was a prison, and he had just locked himself inside. Michael's thoughts were consumed by what had just happened. His hand still tingled from the pressure of holding the phone. Every breath felt shallow, as if the air itself was becoming harder to breathe. He walked aimlessly through the fog, seeking an answer that he knew wouldn't come. He had made the decision. Yes, he had. But could he live with it? The weight of his past choices haunted him like a shadow, always lurking just beyond his sight. He thought about his daughter. He thought about the cold, demanding voice that had left him no choice. Was this what he had become? A man who did what needed to be done, regardless of the moral cost? He had always prided himself on his ability to make the right decisions. But now, he felt like nothing more than a puppet dancing to the tune of an unseen hand. He stumbled to a stop, his chest tight, and his eyes scanned the empty, dark streets around him. Nothing but emptiness met his gaze. The city felt like a distant memory now, a place he no longer recognized. He could almost hear the echo of his daughter's laugh, a sound that now felt impossibly far away. Michael's thoughts were interrupted by a voice, a familiar, comforting voice. It was Lily. She had always been there for him, the idealist in a world that had long since lost its sense of hope. He hadn't seen her in months, but her words felt like a lifeline. She hadn't been part of the decision. She didn't know the truth, but she had always known him, perhaps better than he knew himself. He could hear the concern in her voice, the urgency behind her words. "You can still fix this, Michael," she said. "There's still time." He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But as he looked out at the empty street before him, he knew the truth. His chance at redemption was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The world wasn't kind to those who made mistakes, and he had made too many. His mistakes were his to bear, and no amount of pleading or hope would undo what had already been done. Michael ended the call with a quiet sigh, his heart heavy with the truth he could no longer deny. Lily's words echoed in his mind, but they offered no solace. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. The fog had thickened, swallowing the street around him, as if the world itself had turned its back on him. He stepped into the cafe, the warmth inside offering a stark contrast to the cold, biting air outside. The barista behind the counter looked up, offering a polite smile, but Michael barely noticed. He was numb, disconnected from everything around him. He ordered a coffee but didn't take a seat. His mind was elsewhere. His thoughts drifted to his daughter again. Could he have made a different choice? Could he have saved her without sacrificing everything else? The answer seemed as elusive as the fog that had now settled over the city. Michael stepped into the sleek modern office building of Alexander, his heartbeat quickening with every step. The stark, cold architecture mirrored the man inside. Alexander had always exuded confidence, a man who knew the world bent to his will. Yet today, the usual self-assurance in his eyes was replaced by something darker, something that Michael had never seen before. "You know why you're here," Alexander said, his voice smooth, but carrying an undertone of menace. Michael's throat tightened as the implications sank in. The stakes were higher than he'd imagined, and the cost of his involvement with Alexander's world was becoming clear. Every choice, every step, was leading him down a path with no return. "I need you to understand something, Michael," Alexander continued, his words measured and deliberate. "This game we play, it's not for the faint of heart. You're either in, or you're out." Michael's stomach twisted. The air in the room was suffocating, filled with the weight of unspoken threats. He had never been truly in until now, and the realization hit him like a freight train. The moment of choice was slipping away, no time for hesitation. He had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. Alexander's office felt like a temple of power, the sleek desk in front of him a symbol of his control. Michael, 35, sat across from him, the polished glass surface between them like a barrier. Yet it did nothing to diminish the feeling of intimidation. Alexander, 45, tall and imposing, leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled in front of his lips. "You've been too passive, Michael. Time to choose a side." The words hit harder than Michael expected, and for a moment he felt like a pawn on a chessboard. His entire career had led to this point, and yet now, as the gravity of Alexander's words sunk in, he questioned everything. Was he too deep in already to back out? The stakes had escalated, and the path he was on felt more like a trap than a choice. Michael's mind raced, but his exterior remained calm, fighting to retain his composure in the face of the quiet pressure that Alexander exerted. "Your hesitation will cost you more than you think," Alexander continued, his voice low and calculated. Michael fought to mask his growing panic. He couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Michael left Alexander's office feeling the weight of the decision pressing on him. His mind reeled, his thoughts jumbled. He had been warned, but this was different. The stakes were personal now. He was no longer just a pawn in a game of corporate maneuvering. He was a player. The world around him seemed to blur as he walked through the sterile corridors of the building. Outside, the sun was setting, casting the world in a golden hue, but inside, the walls seemed to close in on him. He felt trapped in his own mind, unable to see a way out. As he reached the elevator, he paused, staring at his reflection in the mirrored doors. The man he saw looked tired, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Was he capable of the kind of ruthlessness Alexander demanded? Could he take the step that would forever change the course of his life? There were no answers, just the quiet hum of the elevator as it descended. Michael stepped inside, knowing that when the doors opened, his life would never be the same. Outside, the night had settled in, but Michael's thoughts were far from peaceful. He stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the city below. The lights twinkled in the distance, a silent reminder of the world he was so desperate to control. The breeze was cool, the sky dark and unyielding. Michael's thoughts turned to his daughter, her face, her smile. He had always promised himself he would protect her, that he would be the man who did what was right, no matter the cost. But now, the cost had become more than he could bear. The choices ahead were steeped in gray, each one as dangerous as the last. He couldn't go back. Once he stepped into Alexander's world, there was no escaping it. Lily had warned him about the price of power, but Michael had never truly understood the meaning of her words until now. He looked down at his phone, the same device that had delivered the chilling ultimatum. The choice he had to make would affect more than just him. It would change everything. The phone rang again, its sharp tone cutting through the silence of Michael's apartment. This time he didn't hesitate. He picked it up immediately. "It's done," he said, his voice steady, though a coldness had settled in his chest. There was no going back now. Alexander had won. The finality of his words hung in the air like a death sentence. "I'll meet you tomorrow," the voice on the other end replied. Michael hung up, his hand trembling as he lowered it to his side. The decision had been made. He had chosen his path, and now he would walk it, no matter the consequences. But deep inside, something had changed. The man he had been was slipping away, replaced by something darker, more calculating. Michael didn't know if he could live with what he had just agreed to, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. Michael sat in his car, parked on the street outside a nondescript building. His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. The documents he had uncovered were damning. His hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. He had known that Alexander was powerful, but this was something far darker. The corruption ran deep, far beyond what he had imagined. He had thought he was doing the right thing, helping expose a broken system, but now he was part of it. The more he looked at the evidence, the more he realized that he had been played. Alexander had used him, manipulated him into doing his bidding. And now, there was no going back. Michael knew that if the truth came out, it would destroy everything. His career, his reputation, and worst of all, his daughter's safety, all of it hung in the balance. But the truth had to come out. It always did. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. There was no turning back now. He had crossed the line, and the consequences were inevitable. Inside the building, Michael met with Lily, his last remaining ally in the struggle. She was leaning over a table, examining the documents that Michael had brought. Her eyes scanned the pages, the tension in her brow deepening with every word she read. This is bigger than we thought," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. He had hoped for a solution, a way out, but Lily's reaction told him everything he needed to know. They were in too deep now, and no one could help them. Not really. She looked up at him, her expression torn. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. Michael met her gaze, his own face a mask of resolve. "I don't have a choice," he replied. The truth was that neither of them did. The deeper they dug, the more tangled they became in a web of lies and deception. There was no way to turn back. The only thing left was to confront the danger head-on. Michael's phone buzzed, interrupting the tense silence between him and Lily. He picked it up, and his stomach dropped when he saw the caller had Alexander. The last person Michael wanted to hear from, yet somehow, the one person who seemed to have control over everything. He hesitated, then answered. "You're getting too close, Michael." Alexander's voice came through the phone, cold and mocking. "You think you can walk away from this? You think you're the hero? You're nothing but a pawn in a game you'll never understand." The words stung, but Michael stood his ground. "I'm not your pawn anymore," he said, his voice low but steady. Inside, however, his heart raced. He knew that confronting Alexander would only make things worse, but the truth had already been set in motion. "You'll regret this, Michael," Alexander warned. "You can't undo what you've started." The call ended abruptly, leaving Michael with a cold, sinking feeling. He looked over at Lily, her face pale, the weight of the conversation settling heavily in the room. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next day, Michael found himself back at the office, alone, with the weight of the previous night's events bearing down on him. His hands shook as he flipped through the files on his desk. Every page revealed more of the ugliness he had been forced to confront. The corruption that Alexander had orchestrated was more far-reaching than he had ever imagined, and Michael was right in the middle of it. His phone buzzed again, but this time, it was a text message from Lily. "We need to talk. It's worse than we thought." Michael stared at the message for a long moment, his mind racing. The walls were closing in around him, and he realized there was no easy way out. He had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. The decision he had made in the heat of the moment had led him down a path of no return. As he stared out of the window at the gray sky, he knew one thing for certain: the truth would come to light, but the cost would be higher than he was ready to pay. Lily's face was pale when she entered the office, her expression one of disbelief. "We have a serious problem," she said, her voice shaky. Michael looked at her, his stomach sinking. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She handed him a file, one that she had apparently just received. The documents inside were even more shocking than the ones they had already uncovered. This wasn't just about corporate corruption anymore. This went deeper, much deeper. It was about lives that were being destroyed by Alexander's greed and power. Michael's hands shook as he read the file. The truth was more horrifying than he could have imagined. "This is too much," he whispered. "We have to stop him." But Lily just shook her head, her eyes filled with regret. "We're in too deep, Michael. There's no way to stop him now." The words hit Michael harder than he expected. He had always thought that the truth could set him free, but now he realized that the truth was a weapon, and he had no control over it. The morning after their meeting with the files, Michael felt the weight of the decision he had made. The walls of the apartment were closing in around him, and every breath seemed heavier than the last. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents strewn in front of him. He had no idea what to do with this information. The truth was ugly, darker than he had ever imagined. Exposing it would ruin countless lives, and yet, leaving it hidden meant letting Alexander continue his reign of manipulation. He couldn't help but think about Sarah, the innocent victim caught in the crossfire. Her life would be destroyed if this information ever got out. And yet he knew she had to be protected, no matter the cost. His phone buzzed on the table, but Michael didn't even glance at it. He wasn't ready to make that call yet. Not today. The consequences were clear. One way or another, the truth had to come out. But could he live with the fallout? Could he sacrifice everything to do what was right? His thoughts were interrupted when Lily's voice came through the door. "We need to talk." Lily walked in, her face drawn and tired. She glanced at the papers on the table before meeting Michael's eyes. "I spoke to someone inside," she began, her voice low. "We need to act fast. Alexander knows what we're doing. He's making his move." Michael felt a chill run through him. They had been careful, hadn't they? Every step had been calculated. And yet, somehow, Alexander had always been 2 steps ahead. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was no longer playing a game with rules. This was survival. "What does that mean?" Michael asked, his voice hoarse. "It means we're running out of time. You need to decide, Michael. We expose him now, or we lose everything." The words echoed in Michael's mind. Lose everything. The weight of that phrase settled heavily on his chest. Oh. He wasn't sure if he could sacrifice everything, but it seemed he was already too deep to stop now. The air was thick with tension as Michael and Lily continued to discuss their next steps. The clock was ticking. Every second that passed brought them closer to an irreversible choice. Michael's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Sarah. "I'm scared. Please, talk to me." The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. Sarah, caught in the middle of this mess, was terrified, and Michael had promised her safety. He felt the cold weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once again. His thoughts flashed to the conversation he had with Alexander, how the stakes had been raised. Sarah wasn't just a bystander. She was a pawn in this cruel game, and Michael couldn't let her suffer because of his mistakes. He turned to Lily. "We need to move quickly. Sarah's in danger." Lily nodded, her face hardening. "I'll set up a meeting. You handle Sarah. It's time to take this to the next level." The meeting was set. Michael and Lily arrived at a secluded, dimly lit cafe, its corner booth, the chosen location for their plan. As they sat down, Michael's mind raced. He had always been the one to handle things, to protect people, but this time, he wasn't sure if he could. The decisions they made today would set off a chain reaction, one that could unravel everything they had worked for. "If we do this," Lily said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air, "we need to be prepared for the fallout. Michael nodded, though inside, he wasn't sure he was ready. The weight of what they were about to do, confronting Alexander head-on, felt insurmountable. He had known this moment was coming, but it was still hard to grasp. The choices ahead were not easy, and they weren't just about him anymore. They were about everyone who would be caught in the storm they were about to create. Michael stood on the balcony of his apartment once again, this time looking out at the city as the sun began to set. The skyline was bathed in a golden glow, but it felt like an illusion. A beautiful distraction from the storm that was brewing in his life. He thought about Sarah, about the lies he had told her, about the damage he had caused. He had promised her safety, but now he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Lily had already made the necessary arrangements, and tomorrow everything would change. The risks were enormous, and the consequences were dire. But as Michael stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he knew that there was no other choice. He had to follow through. There would be no peace without action, no redemption without sacrifice. He had made his decision. Now, all that was left was to face the fallout. Michael's hands shook as he poured himself a drink, his thoughts consumed by the choices that had led him to this moment. The weight of everything he had done, of everything he had become, pressed on him with crushing force. He hadn't expected it to be like this. The rush of power, the dark exhilaration of making decisions that impacted lives. It had all seemed so abstract, so easy at first. But now, everything felt hollow. The phone call with Lily replayed in his mind. "We're in too deep," she had said. "We can't walk away now." Her voice had been filled with regret, but also a quiet acceptance. She understood the stakes. But did Michael? As he stared into his glass, the reflection of his face stared back at him, hollow, tired. A man who had betrayed his own ideals. The silence in the apartment seemed to echo louder than his thoughts. The truth was clear. He was no longer the man he once was. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. He had become someone he barely recognized, someone willing to sacrifice everything for a cause that now seemed more about survival than righteousness. The night had fallen into silence when Michael's phone buzzed again. The text from Lily was brief. "Meet me. We have no time left." His heart pounded in his chest as he read the words. He knew what it meant. Things were coming to a head. They were finally going to expose Alexander. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. As Michael drove to the meeting spot, his mind raced. He had always tried to do what was right, but now everything felt murky. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness, just like his thoughts. He couldn't help but wonder what the cost of exposing the truth would be. Would it destroy everything? Would it save anyone? As he parked, the familiar feeling of dread settled over him, and he realized that the stakes were much higher than he had anticipated. The truth was no longer just a weapon. It had become a force that could tear apart everything he had worked for, everything he had fought to protect. Michael walked into the dimly lit room where Lily was waiting. She was already there, her face hard but her eyes betraying a deep sadness. "This is it," she said, the words heavy in the air. "We can't stop now." Michael nodded, though his stomach churned. He had come this far, but every step seemed to take him deeper into a moral quagmire. The room was stark, the cold light from overhead reflecting off the bare walls, mirroring the coldness he felt inside. The decision was already made. They were going to expose Alexander, and nothing would ever be the same. But the question remained, would it be worth it? Would the truth redeem them, or destroy everything they had left? He glanced at Lily, her face reflecting the same exhaustion, the same burden. She too knew that this was a point of no return. But now there was no turning back. "Let's do it," Michael said, his voice steady, even though he could feel the turmoil inside. They arrived at the office, the final confrontation imminent. Michael and Lily stood side by side outside the building, the cold night air biting at their skin. The truth they had uncovered was in their hands, but so was their future. Michael felt his pulse quicken as they entered. He knew that confronting Alexander meant stepping into the lion's den. Every part of him screamed to turn back, but he couldn't. Not now. They had to finish what they had started. As they walked down the hall, Michael's thoughts were consumed by one question. What would be left of them after this was over? Would they have any chance at redemption, or would they be consumed by the very system they had fought against? His eyes flicked to Lily, who was walking just ahead of him. She too was ready to face whatever came next, even though they both knew the cost. Together, they had reached the end of the road. There was no turning back. The meeting with Alexander was over. The confrontation had been swift, intense, and final. Michael had expected it to be different, more dramatic perhaps, but it was as if Alexander had already resigned himself to the inevitable. The truth had been laid bare, and now there was no turning back. As Michael walked out of the building, he felt a strange sense of emptiness, as if a part of him had died in that room. He had expected a sense of victory, but all he felt was a deep, hollow ache. The truth had been exposed, but at what cost? Alexander was gone, but the consequences of their actions would ripple through everything. "It's over," Lily said quietly, breaking the silence. But Michael didn't respond. He knew that in the end, it would never really be over. There would always be something left behind, something lost in the process. The truth had been revealed, but it had come at a price far steeper than either of them had anticipated. The silence in the room was deafening as Michael faced the man who had orchestrated his downfall, the hidden ally. The truth was unfolding before his eyes, but the reality of it was so much worse than he had ever imagined. He had trusted this man, followed his advice, believed in his promises. But now, everything was a lie. "You played me, didn't you?" Michael's voice cracked as he spoke, the betrayal sinking deep into his bones. The hidden ally, standing with his back to the window, smiled faintly. "I didn't play you, Michael," he said, his voice smooth and composed. "I gave you a choice, and you made it." Michael took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You led me to believe we were on the same side," he spat, his voice shaking with fury. The hidden ally turned slowly, his face unreadable. "We were once," he said, his words cold. "But that was before you made the choice. Now we are enemies." The realization hit Michael like a ton of bricks. The war he had been fighting wasn't just with Alexander. It had always been with this man, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. The hidden ally stepped forward, his shoes clicking against the polished floor. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice calm but dripping with disdain. This was never about sides. This was about control. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the words settled in. The hidden ally had been manipulating everyone from the very beginning, but Michael had never seen it. "You played both sides," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper, the realization cutting through him like a blade. The hidden ally chuckled. A soft, eerie sound that sent a chill down Michael's spine. "I didn't play both sides, Michael. I played you, and I won." The words stung, but Michael didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. "Why?" Michael demanded, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Why do all of this? What do you gain from this?" The hidden ally turned to face him fully, his cold eyes meeting Michael's. "Power, Michael. That's all anyone ever wants. Power, and the ability to control the narrative." Michael's mind raced. It all made sense now. The stakes had always been about much more than what he had been led to believe. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about the battle for control over that truth. Michael felt the walls closing in. He had been so certain of his path, so sure that exposing Alexander's corruption would be the right thing to do. But now, as the hidden owl's words echoed in his mind, doubt crept in. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. The hidden owl's smirk grew wider, almost mocking. "It's not your fault, Michael. You were simply a tool, a means to an end." Michael's fists clenched tighter. "You think you're some kind of mastermind?" he spat, his voice low and filled with venom. "You're nothing but a coward hiding behind others." The hidden ally's smile faltered for just a second, but he quickly regained his composure. "No, Michael, I'm a realist, and you were never cut out for this." The words struck deep, but Michael stood his ground. "You might have been able to manipulate me, but you'll never control me again." The hidden ally's expression darkened, and for a brief moment, Michael saw something far more dangerous in his eyes. "We'll see about that," he muttered, as if already plotting his next move. The atmosphere in the office shifted. Michael realized he wasn't just up against a man. It was the system, the entire network of power that the hidden ally represented. The walls had always been closing in, but now they felt like they were closing on him faster than ever. "You don't get to decide who wins this, Michael," the hidden ally said, his voice cold. "This game was always mine. You were just a player. And now, you're a liability." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He had been right about one thing. The hidden ally had been using him from the very start. "What do you want from me?" Michael demanded, his voice raw with desperation. The hidden ally's cold gaze never wavered. "I want you to understand that nothing you do from here on out will matter. You'll never be free of this. You'll always be my pawn." The words hit Michael hard, but he knew deep down that there was only one choice left. "You don't control me anymore," he said, his voice steady, even as the adrenaline coursed through him. He had made up his mind. It was time to stop playing the game. Michael walked out of the office, his head spinning with the weight of everything he had just learned. The hidden ally's words reverberated in his mind, but Michael refused to let them define him. As he stepped into the cold night air, the city around him seemed almost surreal, as though he were no longer part of it. The truth had been revealed, but it had come at such a high cost. Michael could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, suffocating him. The world had changed, and so had he. He had learned that power wasn't something you could control, it was something that controlled you. And now, the only thing left to do was to face the consequences of his decisions, no matter what. As he stood there, looking at the city below, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't undo what had been done, but he could choose how to face the future. The truth had set him free, but it had also broken him. There was no going back. The rain fell steadily as Michael walked through the empty streets, the weight of his choices pressing heavily on him. He had thought exposing the truth would bring peace, but now it felt like a hollow victory. The city, once full of life, now felt distant, indifferent. Was it worth it? Regret consumed him. The decisions he made had brought him here, to a place where there was no turning back. He paused under a streetlight, looking up at the sky, as if waiting for answers that would never come. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Meet me. We need to talk." He didn't need to check the message to know what it meant. Things were coming to a head. He had exposed the truth, but at what cost? He couldn't undo what had been done. He made his way to the meeting spot, his mind clouded with doubt. At the meeting, Lily stood waiting. "This is it?" she said. Michael nodded, his stomach twisting. They had come too far to turn back now. They had to face the consequences of their actions, no matter how painful. "We can't undo this," Michael said quietly. Lily replied, "But we can face it together." As they walked out, Michael felt the finality of their decisions. The truth had been exposed, and everything had changed. The city outside, bathed in streetlight, seemed distant and cold. "We've lost," Michael whispered. Lily didn't reply immediately. "But we've still got each other," she said softly. Back in the apartment, Michael stared at the city below, the weight of his decisions settling in. "This is it," he said. Lily sat beside him, offering quiet support. "It's over," Michael muttered. "Not everything," she replied. They both knew that redemption wouldn't come easily, but it was all they had left.